all of these conditions are very different from each other, but the thing they have that is similar is that the brain works in an unconventional way that isn't related to what we considered normal in society. But today we're going to focus on dyslexia, which is by far the most common learning difference around, with about 1 in 10 people having it. That works out to be about 6.3 million people in the UK. So it's very likely that you know someone. It's not as rare as people make out. Now, as well as doing fun kind of quizzes, webinars, we can also help recruit diverse talent. So if any of you guys are ever thinking like, yeah, I need a job that is actually going to look after me, support me, we're specialists in that. We can also help with job coaching, CVs, and at the moment we're doing it all remotely. So just a quick webinar, but I'll warn you guys, they're very popular. We do some assessments, which Tim does. And these are if you're already in work and you're looking for more support, we might be able to get a government grant which can help you along your way, and sessions. So this is our lovely team in the background. 80% of us are neurodivergent, and neurodivergent just means thinks differently. When people say, you know, am I neurodivergent, am I dyslexic, people really have no idea what that means. Now, the spiky profile is by far one of the best ways that I know to be able to explain it to other people. So if you see here, we've got high spikes and low spikes, and what's in these images is just random. It could be anything. But the main thing to know is that being dyslexic isn't about being bad at something. It's not saying, you know, oh, I'm not very creative, or I'm not good at communicating, I'm bad at relationships. That's not dyslexia. Dyslexia is the fluctuation of abilities. So you, for instance, and this is only an example, might be amazing at mathematics, but poor at creativity. So there's like a real big difference. Me, on the other hand, I'm really creative, but not very good at maths. That's how I explain neurodiversity to people. It's there being like a massive difference. Like, people often quote Einstein as being dyslexic because he had a severe deficit in some areas and other areas he completely shunned. But that's like a very extreme example. Some people, the spikes are a little bit smaller. So in many ways, we all have a lot of qualities like dyslexia, but some are stronger than others. All right, am I dyslexic? So just to re-say, what we're going through now is purely to give you guys a starting point of a conversation. If at the end of this you want a diagnosis, I recommend speaking with us or speaking to your GP or doctor and going down at this route. But what we say is that whether you are diagnosed or not, if you resonate with any of the things that I'm about to mention, then you're still entitled to have help, because a label is a label and it doesn't really mean much. What matters is that you get the support that's required. I want you guys to tell me in your honest answer, do you miss out words or lose your place when reading? And you might say, I rarely do it, I sometimes do it, I frequently do it, or always, almost always. So an example could be skipping words, sentences, or even several lines at a time. Okay, now why this is a good one is that just because if you're dyslexic, it's quite common to miss words out. Now, if you put rarely on here, that doesn't mean that you aren't, because different people, different kind of strengths or weaknesses. But it's quite common that it's not the reading that people with dyslexia dislike. It's the kind of that the brain can kind of skip words. My brain will get for a book twice as fast because I skip half the words out. But for me, it doesn't seem to be a problem. All I'm saying is, good job I'm not practicing to be a doctor or a lawyer. Next one is, do you get similar words mixed up? And if so, what? An example could be like dog and God, completely different words, but because they're a little bit similar, the brain gets confused. Another example is knife and fork, different objects, but I'm always getting them confused. So just write down if there's any answers. Yeah, any answers that you always get mixed up despite being completely different or quite different. I find it really annoying. Like, I'm trying to have an intellectual conversation and I'll say something which is just doesn't make sense. And then obviously someone's going to bring attention to it and it takes away from the purpose of what I was starting with. It's knife and forky, yeah. It's not for everyone, but that is a real typical trait of dyslexia. Like, I don't know, sometimes I'll say, oh, just put it on the chair, but I actually meant table. Like, examples along those lines. And a lot of the things that I'm explaining today also overlap with conditions such as dyspraxia, which is, again, they often co-occur, so you might likely have both. All right, 5. What object is this? So in the your lovely phone, just tell me what item you think this is. Okay, we've got knife, spoon. Anyone else? Well, maybe it's a bit dodgy on this one, but the reason why we did this one is that this is obviously not a knife or a spoon or a fork. It's I can't remember, I don't even know what it's called. It's kind of like a spork, but a little bit more. And this is because with dyslexia, it's quite common that there may be an object, you definitely know what it is, you've seen it before, but the brain cannot pull that information. So for instance, I've got a comb here, right? And I know it's a comb, I know what it does, but when I'm kind of talking with people, I'm thinking, the part of my brain, it just like vanishes. And that's a very common thing of dyslexia, knowing the answer, but struggling with the retrieval of the information. All right, you're doing really great, guys. Okay, this one is a bit tougher. If you plan to meet, well, no, the next one's a bit tougher. If you plan to meet a friend at 12 noon, what time would you typically get there? So this is about punctuation and timekeeping. So are you the type of person to get there an hour early? Or maybe you're the person who will just never turn up? Honestly, we get quite a lot of people, exceptional individuals, that might turn up a week early or a week late. Oh, it's but that's just the way it is. Okay, so we've got quite a few people who says about 10 minutes or so later. I think that's probably the most common one. A very typical thing for people with dyslexia and even dyspraxia is to turn up considerably late. And a lot of people might think they're being not very professional, or that it's just got poor management skills. But it's not that. It's that the way that the brain processes information, such as like time passing and like, you know, sequencing, is not as strong as someone who isn't dyslexic, for example. It's no excuse not to be late, but it does mean you're more likely to if you do not make reasonable adjustments in place. So I have to set several alarms through the day, like my phone continuously vibrating, always reminding me where I need to be. I have my calendar on my phone, my apps, my computer, everywhere. And if that's something you struggle with timekeeping, it's very possible that you have this characteristic. All right, so righty tighty, lefty loosey. How do you guys remember your lefts from your rights? And this is not just for children. A lot of people think, oh, you know, it's trying to teach your kids left and right, but this affects people all through life. Like, we work with lawyers who, you know, are considered a very prestigious employment path, and they still struggle with some of the basics. Okay, so we've got wearing a watch. That is good. Like, maybe it's your left wrist that always wears the watch, and that's how you remember. So when you just know it. Well, that is, again, a very, very neurotypical way, which is the brain kind of remembers that information. Bracelet on the right. The way I remember is, I think my screen's rotated, but you know when you do the hand up and you can do like the L, I have to do that all the time for left, and the one that doesn't make an L is right. It's why I keep failing my driving test, to be honest. Well, it's probably a few reasons, but it is definitely a challenge. So yeah, very similar, but the old watch on the hand or just making the L shape is a really great one. And it doesn't just affect like lefts and rights, it can also affect like general directions. So if someone gives you kind of like directions up the street to get to the shops, and you have a knack of, despite remembering what they said, still going the wrong way, that's a good sign. Or maybe you're following Google Maps on your phone and you've literally got a GPS and you're still going in the wrong direction. That's, again, is heavily related. And just to confirm, guys, I will be going over all the questions at the end. So if you have them, hold them tight, write them down, do whatever you do best. And hopefully we can also learn some tips and tricks along the way here. Okay, now this one is the tougher one. So the text is on your phone and not on this screen, but read it yourself. But I need to know, how far from New York will it be when the two trains meet? So the added text will be on your phone screen. Oh, one answer, 2 hours. Just so you guys know, I couldn't work this out myself. I was like, oh man. And there is a condition called dyscalculia, which is often related to dyslexia as like the dyslexia of the maths world, but it's not like that. It's that with dyscalculia, quite typically, you know the math, but it comes out wrong because of the way your brain interprets the symbols. But dyslexic people typically struggle with the way, with how the maths is processed and how they view it. So it's not just about maths, it's about how the brain processes several instructions at once. What made this question particularly hard was it was more than just one question. You had to work out one thing, then another and another in sequence. And to translate this in real life, if I said to you guys, if there's a green apple on the fridge, put it in the oven, that can frazzle the brain. Individually, very easy instructions. So put the green apple in the fridge, I can do that. Then put the oven on, I can do that. But when you join them together, the brain finds it difficult to separate, and they join it together and suddenly it doesn't make coherent sense. And this is why you can typically struggle with maths, not because maths in itself is tough, but because of the way that they ask you to answer the question. The next one goes into a bit more detail on this, but again, from the last one, when you were reading the question, how many times did it take you to read it to understand what it was asking? Now, this is important. It's not about the right answer, whether you got it right or wrong, but it's about the amount of times you read it before you really kind of comprehended what the question was asking. Okay, we've got 4 people that have done it so far. And interestingly, it's shifting. So most people, according to this, took about 3 times to read it before they really knew what the question was asking. And this, again, super dyslexic. It's not that it's not to do with intelligence at all. It's, again, how the brain processes the information and like holds on to different snippets. So when you read it first time, your brain will try to like extract certain parts. So it might extract the first part and the second part and the third part. So it reads it in like stages. And this is, for me, the way I get around this is I like highlight words, or I deconstruct it, I rewrite it in my own language. And when people say, oh, for people with dyslexia, it's really ideal to use bullet points. This is the reason why bullet points work. It's because it breaks it down in little bite-sized chunks, which the brain is able to get the most out of. If you do it in like a big jumbled mess, your brain will keep skipping the sections. All right, guys, you're doing really great. We've got a couple more to go. All right, so on this one, you just do like a little nickname or whatever. It's just one question quiz, so it's not too strict. Okay, I'm just looking at some of the comments now. I get badly lost easily. Yeah, know that. I guess the math one. I was expecting a few of you to guess. Dyscalculia flexibility to manipulate numbers. Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's why I can't cook or do maths. Uh, I'm trying to cook at the moment. I'm learning as we go along. And I think this is the thing, just by understanding what makes up dyslexia can make a lot of sense. And it sometimes put the pieces of the puzzle together. All right, so now we've got all the players, hopefully. Write down this spoken number. Sorry, guys, get ready to write it down real quick. 0208133646. I know I didn't give you much time to get paper. One more time. 0208133646. And now you've got to write down the number on your phone. Oh, interesting. So we got someone wrote no chance. I like that. So we've got a fair few different answers here. And I think one person got it right. So congrats whoever got it right. Oh no, 4 people did. Impressive. And I guess you can imagine why we did this one. Okay, accurate. Now, receptionists, again, any job which requires you to input data information typically aren't very well suited to those with dyslexia, because it's about how the brain retains information. So if I say, 0208136046, my brain is still processing the first few digits. By the time you get to the others, I've forgotten this first part. I'm trying to remember this section, and then it kind of goes on and on. I cannot remember pi for the life of me. Was it 3.1 something recurring? And hopefully this helps make a bit more sense. If someone's ever told you to take numbers down or notes, why it is so difficult. If you ever phone up exceptional individuals, by the way, this is our number. So now you've got our number. Never ask me to pass a note on. It's not going to end well. So I need people to say really clearly, I'm like, okay, sorry, can you go a lot slower? And I have to do it via individual characters. So 0, 2, 0, 8. And then once I get to the end of it, I repeat myself again. And that allows there to be less mistakes. So Sonia said, I'm interested in finding out at the end if people have heard of developmental language disorder, DLL. My youngest son has been diagnosed. Similar, do you? Well, I can't go into that right now, but the short answer is, yeah, you're more likely. If you have one neurodiversity, I think it's been, there's been studies on it which have proven that you're twice as likely to have another co-occurring. That's why I got diagnosed with 3 of them. But I think more research needs to be done, to be honest, because it's a big old spectrum and all the symptoms kind of overlap and flow in together. And yes, just so you guys know, I will be sharing the recording after this. So if any of you kind of get kicked out or I sound a bit like a robot, I will be sharing it. All right, next question. Fill in the missing word. Charades was ruined for me forever when my boss had to act out, ... I'm a bit like scared on this question. You guys might put anything. It might be like Cards Against Humanities, but let's see how it goes. So the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. Any luck on this one? You should be able to write down like a sentence or a word, I hope. Oh, okay, there's the button. Hey, Sean, we're ruined when my boss had to act out the moves. Nice. You're fired. Crazy. Furiously. Nice. And this was put in here because if you've ever had to play charades or you're at a table and you've asked to come up with some innovative thoughts, why this can be so difficult for those with like dyslexia, dyspraxia, for example, it all goes back to how the brain processes information. Like you're probably starting to see now how this all relates and stuff. It's not that you're not imaginative, but if you're asked to do something on the spot, the brain is trying to like remember what filing cabinet it had all these different words in. So you kind of know what you're saying, but you can't pull it up. And this might help explain why, if you guys ever struggle with interviews, for example, why they can be so challenging, because people will just ask you questions without time to think and process. And if this sounds like you, it's really important to ask in advance, can I have the questions in advance? And explain why it's of benefit for you and for them. It sounds like me. Yeah, I know that, Lee. I'm always the same. Surprisingly, though, I'm quite good at Cards Against Humanity. I think that's because I've got quite a dark sense of humour. But apart from that, thinking on the spot can be very challenging. This also, again, heavily relates to dyspraxia. It's like knowing what you want, but unable to get it out. And unfortunately, there's a really high percentage of individuals with dyslexia who are incarcerated, so in prisons. And if you think about it, it's not so difficult to see why. Because if you're being questioned by the police, you might not know exactly what to say, and you might say the wrong thing, which again could be used against you. I think it's been estimated that half the prison population is dyslexic, and even if it's anywhere near that in the slightest, is ridiculous. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's much going in to resolve this. It's one of those like things that no one speaks about. But hopefully you guys are starting to understand that how this all starts to link in together. Nice, dancing queen, bam. Check out the meaning. Cool. Okay, now this one is for you guys to come up with some solutions. So you keep sleeping through your phone alarm each morning. What is a creative solution to this problem? So in your own words, what could you do or advice you'd give to a friend or someone to fix this problem? Okay, we've got set multiple alarms. I have 20 for everything I do when I get up. Wow, 20. That's dyslexic goals right there. As someone to give you a call to wake you up, nice. Very good if you're in a hotel. Multiple alarms. Mechanically attach an air horn to an alarm. I like that answer. I have two separate alarms and I set both. One has a snooze function, the other doesn't. I'm a big fan of getting rid of the snooze button. I'm always pushing it. I feel like it's muscle memory now. And it's, I end up having about 10 minutes to get ready for work in the morning at the moment, but probably shouldn't say that on here, right? Okay, have another form of alarm, a light, a telephone. I like that, having multiple sensory informations. So if sound isn't doing the trick, maybe light can. Set up something with bright lights, have two Alexa alarms, alarm on my phone, alarm on my Fitbit, an actual alarm clock. I'm not promoting Amazon here, but I absolutely love my Alexa. She does get me to move. We're like, Alexa, set an alarm for 20 minutes. Alexa, set an alarm for 25 minutes. And she'll do it.
Stop.
Oh,
Stop.
sorry. Now, the reason why I did this is that where a lot of the things we've been talking about, things that dyslexics find hard, there are a lot of things where dyslexics actually have an advantage. And this is a fun little image. So this is what someone did. They got a phone, they got a toilet roll, and they put two cups, which made the sound kind of reverberate and echo. I like the one with the fog hound because people with dyslexia typically have really creative ways of solving problems. And this is because, one, if you struggle your whole life, by finding an ulterior solution makes your life easier, but also the very nature of dyslexia. Oh no, did I actually set off your Alexa, your device? Sorry. Oh, I set off Joanne's device. Alexa, count to 100. Sorry.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Alexa, stop.
13.
Sorry, I thought you were joking. Wow. But yeah, so if you're an individual who's really good at finding different ways, unconventional approaches, they might not always work, but they don't fit the status quo. That is one of the real positives of thinking differently. And, and this is why I love it. Okay, how did you find the last question? Did you love the creativity? Was it easy for you? Did you have an idea, but you kind of found it difficult to put into words? Or did you have no idea whatsoever? Okay, so one of you had no idea, some loved creative questions, but the majority of you had an idea but found it difficult to put into words. And as you can imagine, that answer is the most typical related to those with dyslexia. It's not that if someone was to ask you a question or to ask you to do something that you wouldn't have an answer or you wouldn't have a response, but you're unable to articulate it. So, for instance, you're far more intelligent than what you kind of appear to be or let the world kind of into. This is why, yeah, when I'm talking right now, you know, I stutter and I get stuck on words. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm kind of an expert, but sometimes I sound so uncredible because the way that the words kind of get stuck in my head and are unable to like flow out. And the way that I get around this, or at least try, is by having different stimulus. So I have like bits of paper which allows to like re-jot the memory, not like a load, but just a few things which help it come out, but very common. Annoying, but common. Now, in your own, guys, you don't have to have the microphone off, but actively do it. I want you to read out loud this paragraph to yourselves. Yes. And once you're done, well, read the instructions first.
Language.
So Lee said, I experience the stuck word things when delivering training. I use pictures and post-it notes. That's a really good suggestion. And I can see that the majority of you have read it, as for the little cat pushes. And I put this here is that there's a very common misconception that those with dyslexia can't read. It's not true. Most dyslexic people can read. I read one stat, and bear in mind, these stats are all over the place. I don't trust all of them, but it gives you a general idea, is that 1% of people with dyslexia are illiterate, can't read or write at all. So 99, if this is true, 99% can. I don't know how accurate that is, but I definitely know that the vast, vast majority definitely can read. Why people find they struggle, though, is how the brain decodes the words. So whereas you might know the patterns to words, the structure, what makes up the language, I, for instance, have to read things as in like as picture memory. So I've seen the word dyslexia before, I know what the word is. But when I come to a word I've never seen before, that's a bit difficult. So the reason I asked you to read out loud is a typical trait of dyslexia is struggling to read out loud. And it's something, though I'm quite good at public speaking, if I do say so myself, I'm not good at reading out loud, because the way I read, I'm saying, is kind of looking at a word, analysing it, okay, moving on. It doesn't work really great when reading out loud, because I'll be like, dyslexia is a learning difficulty that primarily, it sounds rather robotic. And this is why, for me, I would just do a bullet point. You ask me what dyslexia is, I'll tell you from my perspective, but I might not be able to read out a scientific term. Yeah, the trauma of being at school. Yeah, school has ruined us, definitely. I would hate when it gets to my turn, it'd be like, Nathaniel, read that. I'm like, oh dear, oh dear. And then I'd end up just like throwing a paper aeroplane or like, acting up, because anything to throw the attention away from me. So if you guys ever struggle out reading out loud, but actually are okay at reading in your head, very typically related to dyslexia. If you can't read at all, that actually highly likely might be something completely unrelated or not directly related. Okay, now I want you to sound out the following word. Now, heads up, this is difficult. So a word's going to appear, and I want you to just say it. So first of all, this one. Now, if any of you want to unmute your thing and try and say this, you're very welcome.
Supracalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Oh, Rachel, absolute pro. I'd say that was spot on, even though the sound of it sounds quite procious. Yeah. Okay, now let's see if you guys can do the next one. What is this one? Yeah, it's that sound when you like disapproving, which is actually a word. And it proves to you that even if it's a small word, you can still have struggle sounding it out. It's not just ridiculously long words. It's because the patterns that you understand of reading, a lot of these words do not conform to that. So you can look at a word that you've never seen before and you're like, I do not even have a clue. I have no idea where to begin with this. Okay, now the next one, by the truth, is the hardest one. So I want someone to give this a go. Oh man, it sounds like you're in pain.
Wow.
Wow, anyway, I don't know if apparently this is the longest word in the English dictionary, and it's a lung disease. Imagine telling like your patient that you've got this disease, eh? I mean, it's a hard conversation to have at the best of times, let alone, taking 5 minutes just to say the word. Now, obviously, a lot of these examples are heightened. They're exaggerated in order to get it out. Yeah, Tim made a point, try spelling exceptional individuals. I can't do it. I struggle so much. And for science and things, it does make it really challenging, because I love science. I was really good at it, but I would fail in the test because though I knew the knowledge, I wasn't able to write it down how they wanted it. And one slight mistake, you could be talking about a whole completely different disorder. Like this long ass word here, I wouldn't know where to begin. Like phenomonotramic silvervelotic Thanks, I got some little hearts for that butchered attempt. Now I believe that 2 or 3. Okay, I think this is the last one. Thank you, Tim. Question 2 or 3. All right, so the last one, guys. Write the alphabet in order. The fastest person wins, okay? So you've only got 30 seconds, write the alphabet. Wow, okay, we've got a couple of different answers around here. So yeah, we've got the correct answer there. Now, if I'm you guys, I have to do the song A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because if you tell me like A, B, C, D, I would definitely get it wrong. Now, it looks to me that all 5 of you got it right, but the rest of you struggled. Now, was it because the time limitations, that it was just too fast and you're not very good on a keyboard? Was it that you knew the alphabet, but without having that song to guide you, it was more challenging? And hopefully you're starting, like all these questions are starting to like really make you see now that people with dyslexia can read, can write, but it's about how the brain processes information. With the alphabet, we all know it, but because of like it's in a set order, that isn't necessarily how our brains learn in the most effective and efficient way. So things like songs and music work well. An example of how I remember a lot of words is through Himines, anagrams. I can't remember the word, but for instance, should, I would say, she should be in the middle of a cold. Said, I always spell said wrong. I do Superman and I dance because the classic big elephants can't always understand small elephants. So I have to do things like that to remember. With the alphabet, it's a bit too long to do that. So the song's really helpful. And the thing I find really annoying, if you're saying, if there's a quiz question, like what comes after Q, rather than thinking P, I would actually have to do the whole alphabet from the beginning. So I want to know what comes near the end. I find it difficult to start the song halfway, like K, L, M, N, O, N, P. So all of these things are traits and characteristics of dyslexia. And though they all might seem a little bit different, hopefully you've seen the pattern. It's how the brain processes information and how it stores it. It's not about intelligence. It's not about things you can't do. It's about the brain working differently. And the reason it's a challenge and a difficulty is we live in a typical neurotypical world, which has developed and grown and developed around a set way of thinking. Had the world been ruled by dyslexics, I imagine a lot of our patterns and systems would be very different. Oh, there's another one. All right, who knew? Bonus question. What is 7 times 12? I like Lee's comment. I own my own dyslexia business and now I have my own dyslexic world. I'm the same. I built my own systems. Okay, majority, you got it right. Now, when coming up with this question, I wanted to pick something which was fairly simple, but not too simple. For me, I could have worked this out, but it would have took me a lot longer. It wouldn't be something I could do straight away. It would be like a lot of a process. And this goes back to, are dyslexics bad at maths? Do I have dyscalculia? No, it's again, I understand the concept. So if your dyslexic quality is not being bad at maths, but knowing the maths. So I know if I do 7 times 10 and 7 times 2, you know, put them together, or if I did a chart, I would get the right answer. That's fine. But the fact it would take me longer to do it in the process bit by bit, that's what makes it more related to dyslexia. So it is very much. And saying, Rachel, I was in the top sets for all creative things like, you know, art or like religious education, because it's more about your opinion. But when it came to things that required an exact cut-through answer is where I was let down. So that definitely is the last question. And we are doing good for time, which I like to see. Oh, there's a leaderboard. But let's face it, we're all winners. Well done, Vicky, for the least dyslexic answers. But it doesn't mean that you're not a winner. We're all winners. It's just about different brain patterns. I think I just couldn't remove the leaderboard. Now, we will get on to questions in a minute, but okay, so great. You guys have done this. You knew you were dyslexic, now you understand it a bit better, you had no idea, now you're starting to question it or wondering, where'd you go now? Now, the most question you guys might be asking, should I get diagnosed as an adult? Well, as a child, yes, because there's a lot of benefits to having a diagnosis, such as extra time in exams for your education. It makes getting certain like benefits and support far, far easier. But when you're an adult, the benefits start to dwindle, quite honestly, and there's less of them. But does it mean that the support still isn't needed? Absolutely not. So what we're able to do, and we support anyone in the UK, we might even support some of you who aren't in the UK, but contact us directly, is we offer workplace needs assessments. Now, Tim might be better to go in a bit more detail about that in a second, but essentially, if any of you are at work or self-employed, depending on a few criterias, you could have access to government support, which means equipment, training, mentoring, and it really does make a difference. And, oh yeah, is there a cost to a work-based assessment? No. So there is if you do it privately, but if you do it via us, we actually do our assessments free. There's always a few little caveats, but on the whole, it's free. And we have a form which we can send you after, which will let you see if you're eligible. But in the short of it, if you've started a job within 6 weeks, it's normally always free. If you have less than 50 employees, it's normally always free. If you run a business and have made over 6,000 in a year, it's normally always free. But again, normally, there's always going to be holes, but get in touch and we can kind of work through with you. And we can also support employees. We do a lot of training, workshops. So if any of you are in an organization or HR department and would love to get us in, get in contact. Dory, I will email you. Now, for the actual process, what does it look like? Because I'm sure a lot of you are like, well, that sounds good. And you do, and the best thing about it is you do not have to have a statement. You don't have to, as long as you resonate and there are elements that you struggle with that are related to dyslexia, we'd be able to help you. We don't require proof because the vast majority of people with dyslexia have no proof, no documentation, no statement, and they need just as much help. So certain things that we might be able to help you with is recruitment. Maybe your organization wants some more diverse talent. You want some more future innovative thinkers. Maybe you want some training. You're like, I'm dyslexic, but my team have no idea what that is. I wish they had a better understanding. We can do that. it could be consulting. Sometimes we'll go to organizations and we'll go through their recruitment process and say, that's not the most dyslexic friendly. You might be unintentionally limiting people. And we also do employee support. So you know what? Let's face it, half of us are unemployed soon because of this disaster. And it's going to be tough for anyone to get a job, let alone someone who has a different way of learning that the hiring manager may not understand as well as you would like. So we will help coach you to stand the best fighting chance in getting the job which works for you. Sorry, you can tell I've done this a few times, but first time I've done this exact presentation. And for the assessments, really simple. So I haven't gone down the private route either. It's very expensive and schools don't always accept it anyway. Yeah, pros and cons. You can do things privately, but yeah, with children it's different. I recommend, if you've got a child, I recommend it. Go away. All right, who's getting blocked?
Sorry.
Alexa, stop. All right. But as an adult, it's very much a personal decision, and I wouldn't say for or against either way. It depends on your personal circumstances. But having a workplace needs assessment is like having a mini diagnosis, but it's not official, but it still gives you a report of what you're good at, what you struggle at, and what may help you. So the general process is secure a job. Get a job, you're halfway there to being eligible. Have an assessment. That is when our lovely Tim or someone else will come down, sit with you for about an hour, then apply for the grant. But wait, I'm dyslexic. I hate doing paperwork. Well, we do the paperwork on your behalf, so job done. And then the training. We can either do the training at your, not at your house, but at your office, at a coffee shop, wherever you kind of see fit. Tim, is there anything else you might want to add on these lovely assessments that we do?
Absolutely. So just to give you slightly more of an idea of the sort of support that's available, for dyslexia specifically, it tends to be technical equipment. So some of you will probably already be familiar with assistive technology, so speech to text and text to speech, for instance. These are the sorts of things from the technical world. Also, personal mentoring for those of you that want to further develop your fundamental skills and personal coping strategies, as we've been discussing in the chat. That's also applicable. Something on rarer occasions, for instance, if you have physical disability as well, it can also be suggested that support with things like travel or scribing and so on should also be included. Something, however, that typically isn't included is what they refer to as business responsibilities. So things like laptops and general equipment, they typically won't consider.
Cool, thanks, Tim. And Lee, yeah, if you guys are interested, you can either go to our website and do an expression of interest form, or you just give us a call on that number, which you guys wrote down earlier and on the screen. It's free. I can't say you'll all be eligible, but it's worth trying if at any least. I have it done, and I have speech software which writes my emails out, and honestly, it makes my world of difference. I can write, but I'm a bit slow, but when I use my voice, as you can see, I can talk for England. And just to finish up, because we've got a couple minutes left, any questions? Either do it on the chat or on here. Anything that you would like to get my opinion on, Tim's opinion, and we'll do our absolute best to answer, or we'll get back to you in a timely fashion. You're more than welcome, Alice. And we do run these webinars at the moment, either weekly or fortnightly, and we do them on a whole range of subjects. The next one is on workplace strategies and assistive technologies. So if you are interested in the type of tech which might be useful, I recommend attending that one. We've got lots of gadgets. Some work for you, some will not, but definitely interesting. So just to check that, I guess I'll give you guys a little bit long to write in case you have any. But you can always come back to us at any time.
Nat, I will add that someone referenced DLD earlier. What I'd say there is regarding language development disorder, that typically gets prescribed if they can't otherwise figure out what's causing the issue. So I would say, because it wasn't specifically mentioned, what can be done is somewhat dependent on the age, i.e. if the child is very small. Certainly not our area, but in a sense you have to wait to see what it develops into. And in the case of adulthood, for some people the symptoms subside, and in others they don't, similar to childhood ADHD in that way. But if it's a teenager, say, then there are going to be support groups and so on that are valid. But for a very small child, there tends to be a wait and see element involved.
Nice. And Tim, in a nutshell, what would you say is the main differences between dyscalculia and dyslexia?
Well, the main difference, the processing wise, they are in fact similar. However, dyscalculia is specifically regarding numbers. Now, we say math, but in fact, it's all manipulation of numbers. So even just writing the sequence of a mobile number down correctly is going to be far harder with someone with dyscalculia. Whereas with dyslexia, even though a lot of us can't remember it in sequence, we can write it down in sequence. So there's an example of the difference. I'll also reference dysgraphia briefly, which is a transcription disorder. And so that again can mimic dyslexia, but it's actually more about the inability to copy from sight to action. So, for instance, not being able to write in a straight line, not being able to keep the distances of spacing correct. So that also affects things like measuring and so on. So that's a difference as well.
Cool. And we've got one other question before we wrap up. ADHD and dyslexia, similarities and differences.
Okay, so similarities include across the shared set. Deficit of short-term memory is very common in both. And can be worse in ADHD. Focus issues are very similar in terms of not being able to read for extended periods of time, or if you're distracted briefly, not being able to go back to what you were doing, that level. Differences include the main thing being the imbalance of dopamine in the body for ADHD means that it's even harder to regulate your mood, and other weird things happen, like you might look like you're in one mood, but you're actually in another. But you don't know that, and the other people don't know that. So there can be a mismatch there as well. And also the hyperfocus is far higher of ADHD. Either the inability to fixate on one thing, or the ability to do so is 0 to 60 with dyslexia, but it's 0 to 100 with ADHD.
Thanks, Tim. And guys, we will actually email you all with a full-up information, so this isn't necessarily necessary. But I hope you guys have found that really useful. And all I ask now is you rate how it went. You can be honest, because we're always looking to improve and make these as beneficial and as useful. You will receive a more extensive survey at the end, which I'd really ask if you guys could give your honest opinion. But I hope it was interesting and useful and gave you guys maybe a slightly different perspective. And at very least, you know, feel good for being different. It's, there's nothing wrong with being dyslexic. It's just about making the world learn about how to work for us rather than us work for it. So how to get in touch. These are the details that you need. I'm always around. I've been Nat. This has been Tim. And thank you very much. And yeah, drop me an email. It's nat@exceptionalindividuals.com if you have any further questions. Me and Tim are always around.
Thank you for attending. And of course, thank you, Nat, for your fabulous, as ever, presentation.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.